Okay, I will get started now. Hi, everyone. I'm Lexi Salt. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a gender-based violence prevention educator and the founder and director of Leading Authentically. I am grateful to be speaking to you today about my consent-based dance workshop and arts-based approaches to consent education and gender-based violence prevention. I'll be discussing how I use dance as a methodology to teach folks about consent in practice, and I will also be describing some key benefits to arts-based approaches and how you can integrate them into your practice. I'm speaking to you today from Kitchener, Ontario, located on the Haldimand Tract within the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. I'm grateful to live and work on this land, and as a settler, I recognize the colonial and gendered violence that is ongoing locally and internationally, and I'm committed to working towards collective liberation. Thanks to everyone showing up live today, and also for those who are going to be watching this recording in the future, and a big shout out to the Learning Network for organizing this discussion. Given that this is a presentation versus a conversation, I encourage folks to engage in the comments and share any arts-based resources you may have. I also want to acknowledge that there are limitations to the nuance and complexities that I can discuss within a 15-minute presentation. So you are welcome to follow up with me if you have any questions or feedback. Finally, these conversations can be triggering, so please take care of yourself as needed. I situate myself within this work, recognizing that there have been many incredible folks doing this work many, many, many years before me, and that there will be many more after me. I'm grateful for my peers in this field, and particularly recognize the many queer women of color who have been at the forefront of developing arts-based approaches in gender-based violence prevention, as well as building safer spaces in the Latin dance communities. My work is in gender-based violence prevention education, and I'm passionate about systemic change, especially within spaces we consider to be safe. For example, sports teams, classrooms, family homes, dance floors, etc. Harm is more harmful when it occurs in our safe space. I use a pleasure-based approach to harm mitigation, and I ground my work in community, joy, and collective care, and believe that everyone deserves to feel safe in their safe space, to experience joy, to play, to explore, to connect, to just simply exist. So harm mitigation, to me, looks like how to foster and build these safe spaces for folks, as opposed to the other way around, to just focusing on the harm itself, working towards that, and then eventually getting to the joy. I came into this work as a dancer in the Latin dance community, and given my background in gender equity work and workshop facilitation. As a result of the gender-based violence I was experiencing and witnessing in the Latin dance community, I was curious of how the consent and healthy masculinity workshops I was facilitating for students could be transformed for dancers. I ended up developing Empowered Connections, Consent on the Dance Floor, which is a consent-based dance workshop. I used dance and facilitated exercises to equip participants with skills in consent, healthy communication, and effective feedback. This work led to the foundation of my organization, Leading Authentically, where we work to foster safer spaces on and off the dance floor. We specialize in arts-based approaches to consent education, and in addition, we also provide gender-based prevention programming in non-dance environments, as well as social justice consultation. As a white woman, it's been important for me to intentionally center the voices and lived experiences of women of color and other folks who experience intersecting forms of harm. My master's research, entitled Dancing Around and Through Harm, examines the lived experiences of women of color with gender-based violence in the Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo Latin dance communities. This research study specifically examines the intersections and impacts of cultural appropriation, traditional gender norms, and power dynamics in the Latin dance scene on women of color's experiences with gender-based violence. A principal finding was that women of color dancers have developed and employ diverse coping skills in order to navigate systemic harm in the scene. This utilizes significant emotional labor and also demonstrates tremendous agency. The goal of my research is to shed light on the systemic harm that is occurring actively, unpack the power dynamics which reinforce said violence, and inform meaningful change within the Latin dance community. If you are interested in reading my thesis, it is publicly available and the link is provided in the comments of this live. I'm committed to my research informing my work and my work informing my research. For those of us who are in the field of gender-based violence prevention, I'm curious how we can develop educational, consent-based programming that is survivor-centric, trauma-informed, and continues to iterate to meet the needs of our stakeholders. When I compare my experience facilitating more traditional, consent-based, and healthy masculinity workshops, for example, using PowerPoint presentations, with my experience facilitating the consent-based dance workshop that I predominantly run now, I see a significant difference. With leading Authentically's consent-based dance workshop, I have witnessed an increase in participant engagement and ability to apply practical skills from participants. For example, when I was teaching at a dance festival one time, I had a workshop participant excitedly share with me the next day that she had practiced what she had learned in the workshop during the social that evening, during the dance. And as a result, she was able to successfully communicate her boundaries with her dance partner. And that wasn't something that she was able to do before. And these are the moments that fuel me in this work. So through my experience developing and facilitating this consent-based dance workshop, there have been some key learning outcomes which have enabled these positive impacts on participants. And I would like to describe some of these learning outcomes with you today. Why I believe they are effective within consent education, and how you could possibly incorporate some of these skills into your own arts-based practices. I would like to note that these are my own understandings based on my own lived experiences in this work, and they have not been formally researched. If you would like some research, you're welcome to check out my thesis. So the first learning outcome that I would like to share from my consent-based dance workshop is the power and necessity of embodiment. So for context, we're not taught about consent in practice. The ways in which we're taught about consent are often harmful. They focus on abstinence, are shame-based, incredibly heteronormative, most often more than heteronormative, like to have no safer spaces for folks who are queer and trans. Furthermore, consent is discussed as this theoretical, like analogous concept. It's framed as this checkbox, check here for yes, check here for no. There's no discussions around consent that it really lacks the understanding around ongoing consent and the nuance of how consent plays out in real day-to-day situations. So it's not surprising how harm happens so often, and that many folks don't know how to practice consent for anything from asking what movie you want to go to during sexual activity. In our consent-based dance workshop, we facilitate exercises for participants to practice setting and maintaining boundaries. And like all skills, consent takes practice, and there's a significant difference between understanding something intellectually in your brain and understanding something in your body. So using dance as a medium, I've seen the learning outcomes from our workshop stick more effectively with participants. And that's because we've been able to a little bit more effectively get them embodied, which has been really lovely to see. So what I would offer is that when we think about teaching consent, how can we prioritize practice over theory? How can we discuss real life scenarios? Are there ways in which you could incorporate movement into your practice? Or how can you incorporate practices of embodiment into your work? Are there ways in which you can support your clients or participant into getting into their body if they're comfortable? This could be anything from a grounding exercise to hiring a local hip hop instructor. Another learning outcome from the consent-based dance workshops that has been valuable is peer-to-peer education. In our workshops, we facilitate dance-based activities where participants are able to interact with each other and work together. This has allowed for co-created and co-curated learning opportunities. This is important as folks are more likely to trust and thus learn from a peer than someone in a position of power. So for example, one participant may discuss their experience during a workshop exercise, while another participant will build off of what they say or reflect a different perspective. And this fosters significantly more learning than a facilitator naming a list of points or a list of lessons. So on this topic, I would offer, what are ways in which you could foster peer-to-peer learning in your work? How may you foster a safer space for your clients and participants to co-create their own learnings? What are ways in which you might be able to decenter yourself and platform your stakeholders in terms of your facilitation? Another successful outcome of the workshop has been understanding that folks learn in different ways. By providing participants different modalities to engage in the workshop content, I have found that the consent-based dance workshop to be more accommodating for folks with different learning styles. The embodied nature of the workshop allows folks to move around and also provides more flexibility in terms of if folks want to participate more actively or passively in discussion. Also, dance is an excellent metaphor for sex. It provides a low barrier to entry for conversations on a topic that hold stigma and cultural sensitivity for many people. If someone is able to learn supportive consent practices in dance, it's more likely that they will practice those supportive consent practices during sex as well. So what I would offer is the ways in which your consent ed could be more accessible, more creative. What do those look like with the folks you work with? Are there ways in which you can diversify your programming? How could you foster more accessible spaces for folks with disabilities, including neurodivergent folks? Another important observation I have witnessed is that the workshop participants have had an increased capacity to express themselves and communicate within the workshop. They are more engaged with workshop content and more active in group discussion and answering questions. A big part of this is because they have more ownership over how they are learning and therefore investment in their own learning. In addition to education, I've witnessed active healing experiences from participants and for participants. We are often able to create safer spaces to talk about lived experiences that have never been discussed before. There's never been a space for it. So on this point, I would say, what are ways in which you can provide platforms for your clients and stakeholders to express themselves on their own terms? Are there more accessible art modalities that you could incorporate into your practice? For example, coloring or singing. Oftentimes, gender-based violence prevention and support are considered to be separate services. Where might there be possibilities for integration? Finally, I learned how important it is for participants to be in a familiar and comfortable environment. Social and cultural relevancy is critical. In our consent-based dance workshops, participants are able to express themselves in a way that is socio-culturally familiar. Some participants shared with me the positive impact of being able to draw from their cultural background, as Latin dance is a part of their collective history for those who identify as Afro, Indigenous, and Latine folks. I also found success due to my own positionality as a member of the Latin dance community. So folks knew I was invested in building safer spaces in the scene because I am also a member of that community. So how can you meet folks where they are at, on their terms? How can you position yourself to be transparent about your role and showcase why you care? Finally, how can you disrupt harm where harm is happening? I believe harm that exists in art spaces often requires arts-based approaches to provide support and education. But that is an entirely different talk for another day. So in conclusion, there are significant benefits in arts-based approaches to gender-based violence prevention. The learning outcomes that I discovered from my consent-based dance workshop that I discussed today are embodiment, peer-to-peer learning, accessibility, self-expression, and socio-cultural relevancy. I hope that a few of those learning outcomes I shared today you found helpful and that you might be able to incorporate them into your own work. I'm really grateful for everyone attending, and if you're interested in connecting or learning more, please feel free to follow Leading Authentically on social media, check out our website, or connect with me personally. All the information is in the comments. Thank you so much.